Determining a teacher's TIA final designation level. What data was used to determine the 23-24 TIA designations that were just approved by TEA? Please remember that TIAs is a 2-year cycle where on year 1 you capture data, which is our T-TESS and SLO scores, and on year 2 we submit that data to TEA for validation and of course approval. So this year's designations that were approved were based on the 2022-2023 T-TESS Summative with SLO report for each teacher. During the month of September in 2023, teachers were asked to review their BISD data teacher scorecard for accuracy. You might want to refer to that scorecard as this presentation is built on that. How did the 23-24 TIA designations get calculated? Remember that the BISD designation system is in 2 components, a teacher performance component and a student growth component. Teacher performance is calculated using the T-TESS process, and student growth is calculated using the student learning objective process. BISD used the statewide performance standards for both T-TESS and SLOs. Those performance standards are the cut points that you see here for each individual component, and we will be going over that as we examine each individual component in the presentation. Let's begin by examining the T-TESS component. The first thing we did was get all of the T-TESS ratings and convert them into a score or a number. A T-TESS rating of distinguished earned a score of a 5. A T-TESS rating of accomplished earned a score of a 4. A T-TESS rating of proficient, 3, developing, 2, and needs improvement, 1. The second step was to check all T-TESS scores for a 3, proficient, or higher in every T-TESS dimension. If a teacher scored a 2, developing, or 1, improvement needed, they were marked ineligible for a designation this particular year. So that was the second step. So let me give you some examples. Here we have example A. Looking at all of these ratings and scores, we see that every score is at a 3 or higher. So this teacher is an example of someone who would be eligible to proceed with the TIA designation on the T-TESS side. Example B. Looking at the ratings, we see one of them is developing, or a score of a 2. This is an example of a teacher that would become ineligible because one of the scores was below a 3. Remember that this ineligibility only lasts that data capture year. So if this happens to be you this year, which is 23-24, you have a chance for designation next year in 24-25. As long as, again, every score is above a 3 or higher, proficient or higher. The third step was to average the scores from domains 2 and 3. That means we got the scores from dimension 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 and averaged them out. So here we are. Here's our example. We have 3, 4, 4, 3, 4, 4, 4, 4. Get the average, and the average is a 3.75. If we look at our state performance standards, we notice that the 3.75 is enough to get the recognized level. So for this teacher would earn a recognized designation for the T-TESS component. Please note that we never round up or down numbers in TIA calculations. So a 3.75 would not turn into a 3.8, it would stay at a 3.75. We never round when we look at designations in TIA. Here's another example. We have dimensions 2.1 through 3.3. We have our ratings that were turned into scores, and we averaged it out. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, averages out to a 3.37. Notice that the lowest level you can get in TIA designation is recognized, and you must reach at least a 3.7 to get that level. Because the average was a 3.37, this teacher scores would be known as no designation because the average is below a 3.7 for the T-TESS component. Remember that you must meet the minimum cut point or state performance standard in order to get a designation. And for T-TESS, minimum is a 3.7. One last example. Here we are. Again, we average out domains 2 and 3. Here are the ratings, turned into scores, add them up, divide by 8, and we have an average of 4.37. Again, remember, we do not round up or round down numbers in TIA calculations. So we look over here, go to the state performance standards. We see the teacher below would be rated as exemplary because the average is above the exemplary score, which is a minimum of 3.9, but lower than the master score, which is a 4.5 that was needed to attain the master level. So this teacher would get an exemplary designation for the T-TESS component. Now, let's examine the SLO component. This is the second component. Just like T-TESS, there are cut points or minimum scores for teachers to earn a designation. In order to get the recognized level, the teacher must have a 55% or higher in both expected and exceeded, while added together. We'll talk about that in a second. To get the exemplary level, the SLO percentage must come in at 60% or higher. Or to get a master level, you must reach the 70% or higher. Please remember that the SLO process produces 3 percentages. The percentage of students that did not meet expectations or did not grow, the percentage of students that met expectations or expected growth, and the percentage of students that exceeded expectations or exceeded growth. Here is how that was reported on your teacher scorecard. The percent of students that did not meet, the percent of students that got expected growth, and the percent of students that got exceeded growth. To calculate this for your SLO component, we add the expected growth and exceeded growth number. A reminder of the process. This is what the SLO process does. The first 6 weeks, the teacher sets the baseline for the student, which is the ISP, and then the teacher sets a target for the student, which is the TSP. So in this case, this student's baseline was 2 dots, which is below typical. The target set by the teacher was 4 dots. So in this example, if the average of the milestones was 1 dot, then that means this kid or this student did not meet the target set by the teacher. The target again is 4 dots. This student got 1 dot, so that would be did not grow. Here's an example. If the average was 4 dots, then we would say this kid got expected growth because the student earned what the teacher's target was set at the beginning, which is again 4 dots here in this example. Or we have the third type of percentage, which is exceeded growth. The teacher set the target at 4 dots. However, the average of the milestones indicate that the student actually achieved all 5 dots, which is above typical. So this student would be known as exceeded growth. So again, those are that's how we calculate percentages in the SLO. That's how that was calculated last year. So let's talk about designations in SLOs. In order to determine the SLO score, we must add or sum the percentage of students who met expectation and exceeded growth. Again, here's what it looked like in your scorecard. And we added the 2 numbers together and we got a percentage. So in this example, we added expected growth at 60 and exceeded growth at 16. Together that makes a 76. We take that to our minimum cut points, and using the performance standards, we notice that a 76 surpasses the master level. So this designation for the SLO score would be a master. Another example. Here we have an expected growth score of 54.6. Again, we never round up and we never round down. So a 54.6 would not turn into a 55. It would stay at a 54.6. Notice the minimum score you needed on your SLO was a 55. So because this teacher got a 54.6, they did not meet the minimum standard. So this would be rated as a no designation for the SLO component. Another example. Expected growth 50%, exceeded growth 8%. We add it together. The sum is 58. We look at the cut point. It's above the recognized score, but below exemplary. So we would say that this teacher is recognized for their SLO score. This is the most important part of the process, which is the last step to determine the final designation level submitted to TEA and Texas Tech for data validation. Both the T-TESS designation and the SLO designation are reviewed, and the final designation is determined by picking the lower of the two. If the levels are the same for T-TESS and SLOs, then that level stays. Let's talk about that for a second. These are the levels of designation. The highest is master, exemplary, recognized, and no designation at the very bottom. So let's look at example of Teacher A. Teacher A on their T-TESS got a designation of recognized. On their SLO component, they got a designation of master. The lower of the two scores is recognized, so the final designation for that teacher would be recognized, which was submitted to TIA and approved by TIA for this go-around. Let's look at Teacher B. Teacher B has a no designation score for T-TESS and an exemplary designation for SLOs. Which is the lower of the two? Of course, no designation is the lower of the two. So that was the final designation submitted to TEA. Let's look at Teacher C. For T-TESS, this teacher was recognized. For SLO, the teacher was recognized. If the scores are the same, then that score stays. So because they're the same, this teacher would be known as recognized. Example, Teacher D. Teacher D got a master on the T-TESS side and exemplary on the SLO side. The lower of the two is exemplary, so that's the final designation earned by the teacher, which was submitted to TIA for approval. Finally, Teacher E. Teacher E scores did not earn them a designation in T-TESS and did not earn them a designation in SLOs. Again, if it's the same level for both components, then that level stays, so this would be known as no designation. And that is how we calculated each